how many of you guys do you know who work at a Spark company? And I know we have, some Splash interns from home. So really briefly about Spark, so you have the hot test. We invest in all different stages of startups, on from Hive, from social media like Twitter and Tumblr, to ad tech and financial services technology, to time now, company products like media, social media. And we love to partner with entrepreneurs who are really imaginative and who care about having an impact on millions, if not more, people with the products that they're creating and experiences that they're creating. So, one of the things that we do is we want to build a community for the entrepreneurs who are building our companies. We wanted to extend that support to you guys as interns because I know you're working hard this summer. And Emily is going to tell you a little bit about her background, but she's really well positioned to give you some advice about how to best succeed at the end of your internships. So, without further ado, Emily, thank you.
Thank you, Danya and Spark and Splash for hosting us. Very excited to be here, see some familiar faces and new faces. So as mentioned, my name is Emily Mithner and I'm the CEO and founder of FindSpark, and we are a community dedicated to your career success. So we create all sorts of programs and resources aimed to get you one step closer to your dream career through the people you meet and the things that you learn. So we've been around since 2011, which is actually shortly after I've met Danya. So Danya and I are actually a great example of a relationship that's been maintained over many, many years. And so we have tons of community members, and really what's important is we are an in-person community. So, just a few examples of things we've done. We produce events for startups where we help connect them to potential candidates for their openings. So these two young ladies right here were both people who attended those events. One was at Blue Apron, and one was at Warby Parker, and they were both hired as a result of attending that event and meeting those teams. And this is Aaron, and he wanted to move from a more non-tech role into a more tech role, but at a media company. So we helped put him in touch with people at Viacom, where he's now working as an analyst. And we've also done programs, other programs to connect intern, entry-level talent to really awesome companies. So before we dive in, I just want to do introductions briefly so you guys can get an idea of who's in the room. And I will be putting you on the spot. So give us a little sense of what you're working on at your current internship or job, and also just your favorite social media platform, because we're going to be talking about how you can use those tools to develop and build your relationships. So I'm going to put Tess on the spot, our guest speaker today, and start with her.
Hey guys, Tess Manning. I work at Time Hop. I'm the head of talent there. So most of the past year I've been focused on recruiting and also some people operations work, so HR things, getting through processes going to support our team and their day-to-day needs that they have on their teams, the organization, helping them get products, feedback to the right place, making sure that they're just happy with everything that's going on in the organization. And yeah. Favorite social media platform? I mean, I guess. But other than Time Up, I would say probably Instagram.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Bianca. I work at RF Madison. It's a fashion startup. We just started up a couple months ago. And I would say my favorite social media is Instagram.
Great.
Hi, I'm Shivambi. I work at Celerity, which is a financial tech startup. I'm the finance marketing intern, so I kind of work on a lot of market scoping and different efficiency processes. And my favorite social media platform is Instagram.
Hello, my name is Isaac.
No, you can go ahead.
Hello, my name is Isaac. I'm working as a business developer for Pablo. Pablo is a marketer for college students to buy and sell second-hand items locally, but actually launching equipment for students here to download. My favorite social media platform is LinkedIn.
Hey guys, I am Akira Sambakar. I work at Splash here, so it wasn't that long of a commute to attend this event, so it's great. I'm working as an intern for the customer success manager team, which is the growth and account management team, I guess you could say. Some cool projects I've worked on. We have a new email interface that's going live tomorrow, which is exciting. So I got to create some material for that and just kind of working with Salesforce as well. So that's been really awesome. Just getting to know different software tools that our own website can integrate with. So that's been really awesome. Favorite social media platform? I would have to say Splash. I mean, it's not really like technically, but it's cool because you get to design and customize your own website, not website, sorry, your event website, which is really cool because sometimes Facebook event pages can get a little boring, so that's been awesome. But my second best would probably be LinkedIn. I've really utilized that to find some mentors to kind of help me in my career finding process, so that's been really awesome. Great.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm currently looking for an internship into fashion or marketing, but for now I'm still a YouTuber. And my favorite social media platform is probably Twitter.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, and I recently started a fashion internship on Fashion Vista. And I don't know if you guys have any idea what it is. Basically, you have to write articles and photographing people on the street. So from this, I can do an interest in marketing. And I started looking for internship to get more experience in that field. So I recently also found an internship at ARB in marketing. So I think I'm trying to merge those interests with social media. It's been great so far. My favorite social media platform is Instagram and Tumblr.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. So I wanted to just quickly go over some of the points from the past 2 workshops in this series. So from the very first session, we talked about startup culture, the importance of networking while you're in your internship, not just with your direct colleagues, but with the community as a whole. We talked about public speaking, which I'll just put you on the spot a little bit, but it's so important to think about how you will be able to present yourself, whether that's in a meeting or maybe giving a small presentation like something like this. And of course your online presence, which we're going to delve more into, how you can take all the things that you've done this summer and integrate those into your online presence. And one thing about these sessions is we want you to take actionable tools home with you. And so we're going to have you do a little bit of writing throughout the workshop tonight, but I'm also sharing these slides, and I want you to think throughout the presentation, how can you take what you're learning and create action items for yourself and goals for yourself. So here's just some examples from the first session. This is one of my favorite, which if you are working on your public speaking skills, identify your filler word of choice. So it might be like, but everyone usually has one, even if you're really good at speaking. So think about that and try to use it less. From session 2, we were focusing on how can you make sure that you make an impact while you're at your internship, what you can do to really get connected and integrated into your company beyond just working on your individual projects, and how to speak up and make sure that you're staying on the same page with your supervisors, your team about your goals and your projects. So here are some action items from that session. Great to hear that some people are doing things like using tools like LinkedIn to reach out to people they admire. So again, integrating yourself not just into the startup or company you're interning at, but into the community and industry as a whole. So tonight we're going to talk about positioning your experience. So you've all learned a bunch of new things recently, you've worked on really cool projects. So how can you take that and position that to get to wherever you want to go next? Also, of course, maintaining your connections. So one of the biggest questions we get through working with people through FindSpark, and even through the questions that people had as they were signing up for this event, is how do I stay in touch? How often do I stay in touch? What do I say? How do I say it? So we're going to cover that sort of thing. And then resume, LinkedIn, website, and card. So all the things that you need to be able to show people what you've done and really showcase your skills, your efforts, and what you've learned. So just a little bit of a background on me. This is what I do on a daily basis. Through FindSpark, through teaching, I'm actually an adjunct professor at 2 different schools where I teach career courses. So I get to actually, as a course, talk about LinkedIn and Twitter and resumes and all that good stuff. But really this is my bread and butter. So ever since I started kind of the idea behind FindSpark back when I was in college, I really wanted to emphasize how important it is to focus on all the things you have in your control in terms of how you can put yourself out there and really empower yourself throughout your career by connecting with people and really forming your own little community. And I put all of these things into practice in terms of maintaining my own connections and that sort of thing, not only through FindSpark, but also our sister agency, MCG Social, which is our consulting branch. And just an example for that, about 90% of our clients are repeat and are also people who have just come from personal connections and referrals. So I wanted to just start by having you all do a little exercise here. So if you have your phone or something to write on, just reflecting on some of the bigger themes that we're going to talk about before we really dive into it. So a big part of this is how you can maintain your network, right? Because your connections aren't anything if you're not keeping up with them. So, so to skip to number 2, think about 2 or 3 of the most interesting people who you've met over the past couple of months. Because the important thing with networking is not to feel like it's a numbers game, like you have to have the biggest network, the most followers, you have to meet every single person, meet up with every single person for coffee. But really the important thing is that you're forming meaningful relationships. So take a moment to think about who are, again, 2 or 3 of the most interesting people you've met throughout your summer within the company or within the community at large. And also skipping back, what has been your biggest accomplishment? And this can be something very sort of quote unquote practical. So did you launch something? Did you create something? Did you grow numbers? But also think about sort of your interpersonal skills. So did you learn a new language, coding or non-coding? Did you learn how to collaborate with a bigger group, work on a smaller team, a bigger team? And then for the third prompt, think about between all of these things, so your resume, your LinkedIn, your website, or your business card, what do you have that you're already most proud of out of all of those things? Because I want you to think about, of course, not only what you can improve, but I'm sure you already have solid starts for these things, so it's important to just think about what do you want to take to the next level and focus on, because we are going to talk about all 4. So again, biggest accomplishment, 2 to 3 of the most interesting people who you want to stay in touch with and really deepen your relationship with, and what sort of element of your personal brand are you most proud of to date? So the first topic is positioning your experience. There are a lot of other people who have done the same thing that you've done. So if you are, say, I'm going to pick on you, a customer success intern, right? So it's kind of account management, community management. So other people who have had an internship in that realm have probably worked in Salesforce, right? Launched products to help retain people. What can you write about that shows that you had an impact and you've done something different than other people who have had that same exact title? It's really important that you use numbers and results in your resume bullets. So as you think about your accomplishments, think about how you can quantify them. And now is a really good time to start thinking about that, because you might not always have access to the information that you have while you're once you leave your internship. So maybe there's certain analytics or numbers that you want to get a sense of, so you can add those to your resume before you leave. The other thing to keep in mind is context. So you have learned a lot about your company, right? You've been in it for the past few months. So the way you talk about elements of your company and what you've worked on and projects you've worked on, they might not make sense to an outsider. So make sure that you have other people look at your resume, including people who are currently at your job, and make sure that things make sense. And because you're an intern, you might have been working on a lot of projects that maybe don't necessarily have big numbers or fancy results or that sort of thing. But instead of talking about results, maybe you didn't generate like $1 million in extra revenue or that sort of thing, but can you talk about during your time there, did the company grow revenue, right? Or who are the clients that you've worked with, right? So Splash, for instance, has a lot of really amazing clients. So maybe one of your bullet points can include clients such as XYZ, and then a future employer can say, oh wow, this person knows how to interface with really important people at big name companies. So think about the context you can offer. And then also think about the new skills you've learned, both hard and soft skills. So of course people want to know, do you know how to use Salesforce? Do you know how to use Excel? Do you know how to use certain pieces of hardware, again, software, hardware, websites, that sort of thing, very important. But also your soft skills. And for me, when it comes to talking about soft skills like teamwork or being able to work in a fast-paced environment and all those sort of things, it's really important to show that you know how to do those things and not just say it. So using those soft skill terms like in a bubble, without context, so just saying I'm a hard worker or I know how to work in a fast-paced environment, show me you know how to work in a fast-paced environment because you launched a product within 2 weeks, right? Or you planned an event of over 500 people in just a month, right? Or with limited resources. So don't just say those sort of soft skills, but show in context how you can sort of prove that they make sense for you. And so this is an interesting idea and concept. DEX, you'll hear the word DEC, right? It's a big startup word. So what's your deck look like, usually in terms of investments and that sort of thing. But either doing it in actuality or not, think about like what would your deck look like in terms of wrapping up the end of your summer, all the projects you've worked on, all the things you've learned, the people you've met. Your internship now might not lead to very direct opportunities right off the bat. So things like turning it into full-time or getting another offer because of a direct referral right away. But the opportunities and the relationships and the projects that you're doing during your internship can open doors, and Tess is gonna attest to this later, can open doors, months, years, 5 years, many years down the line. So it's important to think now about really taking everything together that you've learned, putting it into one spot so that you have that to look back as a reference. And also, how impressed would your supervisor be if you did the work and said, hey, just as a reminder, here's all the great stuff that I did this semester, right? Because really what we're gonna be talking about a little bit later too is you wanna make it easy for people to know what you've done and to know how awesome you are. So putting it together in a deck is a really great way to show that. And I wanted to give an example of somebody who I think did a really, really great job of positioning their experience to get a job that they wanted. So this is Emily Leong, and she was a member of the FindSpark community. So at first I had only met her online. I noticed her, she stood out to me. Can anyone guess when I saw her on Twitter, maybe why she stood out to me, why I took extra time to look into her profile? She's got a fun picture, right? She's got a fun picture. She looked fun. So I thought, who is this fun-looking girl who's a part of the FindSpark community? So I checked out her profile and looked at her tweets. I really liked the different types of tweets that she was talking about, things, articles. They were really relevant to the types of things that FindSpark deals with in terms of recruitment and events and professional development. And then I went to her LinkedIn. And I did notice that she only had about 20 or so connections, which is not a lot. But I didn't really care about that. What I cared about was that she did a really great job selling her experience. So at that time, she was only a sophomore, and really the only real job she had was being an assistant in her honors college department during college. So she hadn't had a real internship, but she did a really great job explaining the projects that she had done. So for instance, one of the big things that she launched while she was at her job was a department newsletter for the honors college students to let them know about the programs that the honors college was putting on. And a lot of those articles were professional development articles, which she wrote. So at FindSpark at the time, we were looking for a marketing intern. And so I was looking through this experience, some other things that she had written, and she had a really complete beefed out profile with examples. We'll talk more about LinkedIn later, but examples of her work. I could actually click on the newsletter, read it, check out the articles. And so I actually took the time to send her a LinkedIn message really late at night. This all happened as I was just perusing Twitter aimlessly. And I said, I know you're a member of the FindSpark community. I saw you participated in a Twitter chat, and I think you should apply for our internship if you're ever in New York. So she wasn't actually even based in New York. This was a total long shot. So she replied Within 12 hours, I had her application in my inbox the next day, and a few weeks later, without actually even seeing her face ever, she was interning for FindSpark. And she beat out a ton of people who had more real experience. But she did such an amazing job customizing her experience to our internship once I had reached out to her and once she had applied, that I just knew she really, really cared. And even from the beginning, you know, she wanted to do a marketing internship, and she took her experience, as irrelevant as it seemed, and made it relevant. So moving on to maintaining your connections. So again, your network is nothing if you don't maintain it. So maintaining is actually, you could consider it even more work than making the connections in the first place. So what can you do to stand out now that your internship is wrapping up? I wanted to start with a really, really easy one, which is thank you cards. Just curious, how many of you have ever sent like a thank you card to a boss after an internship? Okay, a couple. It makes an enormous difference because no one does it, right? So super easy way to stand out. There's a million stationery stores around. Get a card, and better than just putting it on their desk, mail it to them. Mail it to them after you leave. Because, you know, it's still fun to see a thank you card on your desk, but it's really fun to actually get it in the mail with a stamp on it and everything. So take the time to send a nice, simple thank you card to your boss, maybe the CEO of the company, people that you didn't necessarily work with, but you want to make an impact, and let them know that you appreciated the experience that you had. So number 2 is final meetings. In the last workshop, we talked about having meetings with your supervisors and your bosses, and I was a little surprised with the amount of people who said they didn't have regular check-ins with their bosses. So make sure that you arrange final meetings with the people who are important. So your supervisors, of course, being number 1. And hey, if you can nab a meeting with the CEO of Splash before you head out, there's a good chance that they'll be interested to know what your experience was like. And then also think of any end of summer gatherings. So whenever your internship program is officially done, pay attention to what other people in the office might be planning. Like, are there happy hours? Are there the retreats? Are there internal meetings or things that you can attend or go to? Make sure you're really taking advantage of every opportunity to integrate yourself into the company beyond just, you know, sitting at your desk and working at your projects during the day. And then the other thing would be to set up during that meeting or separately a resume review with your supervisor or someone on your team. So this is important for a couple of reasons. You know, number 1, obviously they worked with you closely. So to get their feedback on what you're putting on your resume is really important and really, really valuable. And to do it in the moment while you're still at the company and haven't yet left is the best time to do it. The other reason you want to do this is because you probably want to check and just make sure that, you know, I talked a lot about results-oriented bullets. You want to make sure that the information you're putting on your resume, that you're actually allowed to put that information on your resume. So I've actually had interns show me resumes, and you know, they had their resume after interning with us, and they put some information on there that I just didn't want to be public. You know, so I let them know, hey, you know, this is something that you can put on the resumes that you're emailing out to people, but I don't want you to put it on your LinkedIn, or I don't want you to put it on your like publicly downloadable LinkedIn. So, you know, you might be working with sensitive sales numbers, sensitive client information. So just, you know, doing that resume review with a supervisor will make sure that you're allowed to put the information that you actually want to put on that resume. So, fun fact, the emoji with the Rolodex, his name is Johnny Appleseed. It's a little blurry there, but in case you're wondering, this is what it looks like blown up. So a big question that we get all the time is, how and when do I follow up? I know I'm supposed to follow up, I know I'm supposed to maintain connections, but what does that actually mean? How do I put that into action? So the number 1 thing I think you should all do is continue to be a user. Wherever you're working, there's a product, there's clients, there's a website. Make sure that throughout the months, the years following your internship, you stay up to date with what's going on. And because most of you are working at startups, again, being a user, right? Seeing when updates are made, seeing when things are launched. Because by being a user, you'll be able to do things like, say, post about your company's product on social media. So if you're a user, you're going to know when that new product launches, right? And you can tweet about that and @mention your boss or @mention your CEO. And then the other thing is to share helpful and relevant content. I think people get overwhelmed about feeling like they have to come up with things to say to their supervisors as a way to remind them that they exist. But I think it's better to not feel so forced with it and to really just let it happen naturally. If you've developed close relationships with a few of these key people at your internships or in the community, there's going to be times when you're reading an article or you see something on Twitter and you think, wow, John Doe will really love this. They'll think this is a great article, or this will be really helpful, or I remember we had a meeting about this and now it's happening. So wait for those just organic, natural prompts to happen and use that as a reason to email or connect with these past supervisors and connections. And one of the biggest things that you can do that mentors and supervisors love is to just send them notes now and again that say, hey, remember back in the day when I was learning Salesforce from scratch? Well, I just wanted to let you know that I got a new job and they told me that one of the biggest reasons that I was hired is because I'm a master at Salesforce now. And I just wanted to say thank you for giving me that opportunity to really develop those skills. Hope all is well, and hope to see you soon, right? And you send that email with no expectations. And that's a big thing in terms of maintaining your network is you're going to send a lot of things, you're going to post a lot of things, and you just have to realize that a lot of people are busy and they might not reply, they might not retweet, but there's a really good chance that they'll see it. So it's always worth sending things even if you don't get a response. So again, when I talk about mentor and mentee relationships, a lot of people feel like, oh, as the mentee, I have nothing to offer. But one of the biggest things you can offer is to let the person know and confirm that their advice is actually helping you and that you're taking that advice. So I want to give an example of a member of our community who I've really watched her develop a relationship with this dream company of hers from start to finish. So this is Nancy. She is a designer. She went to college at Ringling College of Art and Design in Florida, but her heart has always been in New York. So she spent a few semesters and summers interning here and did a great job building her network. She became a member of the FindSpark community and, for example, came to one of our full-day career conferences back in the fall. So in the fall, we had a speaker from her dream company, which was MRY. And she took the time to send this awesome tweet about how excited she was to have heard from someone from MRY. And I used this tweet in my first presentation as an example of a perfect tweet. And I'll just quickly go over that again because I think it's really important. So number one element of the perfect tweet is she used the hashtag, right? So whenever possible, if you're going to an event or if you're talking about a certain news topic, if there's a hashtag, use it so your tweet will be found. Number 2 and 3 is she mentioned both the person and the individual and the company. So depending on the size of the company, there might be a small chance or maybe a bigger chance that, say, a CEO will be reading or somebody at the MRY company Twitter account will actually see your tweet. But it's always worth a shot. But more importantly, it's very, very likely that if you tweet at an individual, if they're a normal person with a normal amount of followers, they're going to get that notification. And what's the first thing you do whenever you log on to any social media network? You check your notifications, right? Because everyone wants to know that their existence has been acknowledged. It's a very nice feeling. So number 4 is that she included an image. Pretty much every social media platform now is becoming image focused, and it's much more likely that if you include some sort of image, that tweet, that post, that Facebook post, whatever it is, will be seen and found. And number 3 is not emojis specifically, but just the fact that she added some personality by using emojis. You want to take advantage of the fact that you can use these platforms to give people an insight into the type of person you are beyond just your resume. So here's that first tweet. Here's another tweet. So she, while she was here in New York at one point, reached out to people at MRY because she had applied for an internship there the summer before, got offered the role, but took something else instead. So to maintain the relationships, she asked if she could get a tour from the person that she had been in contact. And you can see she @mentioned the 2 people she saw. She didn't include an image, but she did @mention people and the company, and she got some engagement there. And then a few months later, she announced via her favorite type of emojis, which are Seinfeld emojis. She's a big Seinfeld fan, shows her personality, that she ended up landing her dream internship at MRY this summer, and she's killing it there. So really great example of using social media and maintaining connection with a company over a long period of time. So, this was in the fall, and she had applied originally for the internship the first time the summer before, and then she finally landed the internship and accepted it this summer. So just a few examples of how, these small little @mentions and ways of staying on people's radar can help make a big difference. All right, so the final chapter of tonight is your resume, LinkedIn, website, and business card. So how can you take all of this experience, all of your personality, and put it on these 4 very, very important things as a way to make it really clear for anyone who Googles you, meets you at an event, to know how awesome you are. So really, really important things before we dive into the nitty-gritty of each of these things. Number 1 is that you are in control. You do not have to post anything you don't want to post. You don't have to post about experiences you don't think are relevant anymore. You don't have to be on every social media network there is. You get to decide what you want to show off and what you want to focus on. And I think it's really, really important to understand that and let that settle in, that you are in control of your story. And by taking advantage of these things like a resume, like your LinkedIn profile, you get to craft your story and really take control over what people are going to learn and read about you. So with that, you don't need to include everything. I mean, how many of you have had a job maybe that you didn't enjoy? Right? Maybe, or you didn't, you don't feel like actually is relevant to where you want to go, right? It's very likely that that might happen. Or maybe you had a project that you've worked on that, was admin-y, or you didn't really care about it. So just remember, you don't have to put everything. And people have really short attention spans, so it's actually better if you don't include everything. And we'll get more into that later, but just don't make people sort through a lot of crap. Right? Focus on what you think are your best accomplishments and things you actually care about. And the other thing is, do include things that might not be real experience, but that you worked really hard on and helped you gain real skills. So what do I mean by that? Side hustles, club activities, like being a student leader on campus, volunteering, blogging, doing things that aren't necessarily because an employer hired you to do them, but because you are taking initiative to do those on your own. Because those are the type of things that are really going to set you apart from other people within the application process. All right, so here are some pretty easy resume musts. Number 1 is 1 page. I have only ever heard from recruiters that they have not looked at resumes that are 2 pages because they think it's ridiculous that an intern or someone entry level with just like a few years experience would have more than 1 page. And I will give that piece of advice while also mentioning that I had a 2-page resume when I graduated, and I had someone tell me, you gotta tighten this up, right? So you might have a lot of interests, but what's important is that as you're applying for different jobs, you customize that resume so that you're really, again, only pushing to the forefront what's relevant and most impressive. The other, easy but important to mention is that it's consistent and easy to read. So, nowadays a lot of people, you might read about, infographic resumes and all these like weird, quirky ways of, getting employers' attention. But remember, at the end of the day, they need to be able to quickly and easily see where you've worked, what your job title was, when was the time that you were working there, and that sort of thing. So don't overcomplicate things. And on that note, also make sure you pay attention to the guidelines when you're applying for jobs. If they tell you to submit a docx file, even if you hate docx files, submit it like that. Because if you submit a PDF when they ask for a docx file, your resume might go into the system as like an unreasonable piece or unreadable piece of garbage, right? Because a lot of companies have what's called applicant tracking systems that are what they sound like. It's a system for tracking their applications. So a really easy way to get eliminated is to just straight up not follow the directions with the type of materials they're asking for. So that's an easy one. And again, customization is so, so key. You will have much greater success if you customize your application materials for each job you apply for and spend more time on less applications than if you're sending generic resumes and cover letters to lots and lots of different roles. And the other great thing about customizing your applications and taking more time on that process of research and putting together your materials is that there's a higher chance you will get the interview. And when you get the interview, you will feel more confident and prepared because you did a lot of research, right? So if you spend hours stalking, researching, whatever term you'd like to use, multiple employees at the company or other people who used to intern there or have that job title that you want, when you get into that interview, you're gonna have a lot of things to talk about. And you want that interview to feel like a conversation, and customizing that resume and doing that extra research will help it feel like that. And so I just wanted to share a couple of resume examples, and these examples are actually all real resumes from members of the FindSpark community that all of these people got jobs with these exact resumes. And the reason that I picked these out is because they're all pretty different, right? They're designed different. This one is literally the opposite way of all the other ones, right? And I would actually never recommend in general doing a horizontal resume, but it worked for her. She's a designer. It ended up catching the recruiter's eye. It was in a resume book that we had put together for some of our employers, and that one obviously stood out for a reason. But I think, again, it's important, some consistent things about these, even though they're different formats, is that they're easy to read, right? They're clean. Some of them have a few design elements, but overall, I can easily and quickly see, again, the title that they had, the place where they worked, their contact information. They also all put their personal websites and or their LinkedIn URL on their resume. And that's also a really, really good idea, because a lot of times when you're submitting these files, again, as PDFs or DocX files, to be able to just click on a live link that they can then be sent out and see more of your work, see your LinkedIn, and get a better sense of your experience. Those are things that are easy for the recruiter or the hiring manager to share, and a little bit more easy than, say, forwarding an actual document. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to learn a lot about you quickly. So here are a few LinkedIn musts. And I mentioned this a little bit back, but your summary is so important. LinkedIn has a summary spot, summary space, and a lot of people don't use it or they bury it. And I believe it's important to have it at the top because that gives you full control over what people are learning about you right off the bat. Because if you think about it, as they read your job titles, as they read where you worked, as they read your education and things like that, they're going to make assumptions. They're going to make assumptions about your experience. They're going to make assumptions about what you want to do. And you really want to take ownership of crafting your story and telling someone right off the bat, this is how the experience I've had in the past is going to take me to where I want to go in the future. So use that spot to tell your story. The next thing is to add rich media. So a lot of you are working on websites, you're working on projects, and it's a great thing if you can show people beyond just talking about it, what that project looked like. Right? And I'll show some examples in the next slide, but this, LinkedIn, I used to say it's a new feature. It's been around for a while now, so it's not that new anymore, but there's still a ton of people who are not using it. So if you do use rich media, which means basically there will be an image or images on your LinkedIn profile, you're totally gonna stand out. And again, everything is becoming more visual, and people just like to easily see what you're talking about instead of having to imagine it. The next thing is recommendations. So how many of you already have a LinkedIn recommendation? Just curious. Okay, a couple. So as your internship is ending, this is a perfect time to get another recommendation or your first recommendation for your LinkedIn profile. Do it while your work is fresh in the mind of your supervisor or your boss. My big tip for recommendations, which makes people uncomfortable, but I promise you it works, is to actually offer to write the recommendation for your boss or your supervisor. And it seems a little weird, it might seem a little pushy. A lot of people don't like talking about themselves, but there's a few reasons why I think this is really important. Number one, it forces you to reflect about how you did. Number two, it makes your boss's life easier, right? Because your boss is probably busy, or maybe you want to get the CEO's recommendation or someone even higher up, right? So by offering to do it for them, they might think, oh, thank God, right? I can always tweak it. And number three, I really just honestly think you'll have more of a chance of them actually doing it if you tell them what to do, if you tell them what you want them to focus on. So you can do this a few ways. You can say in the initial contact, hey, I would love to get your recommendation. If you're busy, I can totally write it for you, or I can write an outline. And again, if they want to change something, tweak something, add something, they always can. But actually, the fourth reason it's great to write it for them is eventually, hopefully, you'll have multiple recommendations on your LinkedIn profile, and you don't want them all to say the same thing, right? So maybe you already got a recommendation that talks about what a team player you are and how you can work in a fast-paced environment. And for this one, you really want to focus on the fact that you learned Salesforce in like 2 weeks and became the company expert and taught a bunch of other people. You might have done a bunch of things at your internship, and your boss might not assume or know or realize that that's the thing you want to focus on or emphasize. So just giving them an idea of what you want them to focus on is really helpful. And this is something that's fairly new, and FindSpark has a relationship with LinkedIn, and I know they're really pushing this, which is LinkedIn publishing. So you may or may not have seen that people can now publish blog posts on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is really trying to make a push to become a news site, to not be a site where people, what I like to say, set it and forget it, right? Like you set up your profile and you don't check it for 6 months until you need that next job or internship. They want it to be somewhere where people are getting information, connecting with each other actively. And so publishing a blog post about your experiences at your internship or things that you've learned is a great way to get on the radar of your entire network at once. Because the awesome thing about LinkedIn publishing is you may or may not have noticed this, but when you publish a post, a notification goes out to everyone who you're connected with. So, creating that sort of wrap-up report of what you've done, what you've accomplished, sort of like I mentioned earlier, like your deck, your experience deck. A great place to put that is on LinkedIn. And so here are just some examples of what your rich media can look like and where you might want to put it. So you can put rich media in your experience sections, you can put it in your education. So these couple of examples are, these are some articles that this person has written herself. This is someone who got featured on their college's website. They were profiled. This is someone who worked on their school's website, so actually putting a link to that website and the articles they wrote. And then the most basic thing you can do if you feel like you don't have a file or a link to a specific project is just put a link to the company website. As easy as that. Because if you're working at a startup or you're working for a small company, or who knows, even if you're working for a big company that you feel like everybody knows what it is, there's might be people who don't know what it is. So, this person just put a link to that company website, and it, again, just creates that nice visual and makes me want to stay on that page longer and helps me understand what you've done and the types of places you've worked. And then, of course, having a personal website, right? Having a place where people can come, one spot where they can find everything they need, right? So you probably have multiple social media networks around the internet, but having that one site where you can really customize the feel and, again, take ownership of the story that you want to tell and the types of experiences you want to talk about, place to do that is a website. And really simply, of course, you want to have the about and the contact. About is usually first, contact is usually last. Sometimes people like to do fun things like call the contact page, work with me, or let's get coffee or something like that. But I really recommend just putting contact, because I've been on a lot of personal websites and people are just so inclined to look for that word contact. If you don't have it, they might think you don't have a contact page and they might leave your site and not contact you. And you want to make it as easy as possible for people to contact you. And of course, in between, the important stuff is your projects, your experiences, your resume. So what sort of media and in what way can you show people more in depth than just a bullet on a resume what you've accomplished and done at your different internships and during school. And here are just some examples of different websites. So this one is really cool. It's actually, I believe, built on a Tumblr, and you can sort between the different types of projects because he has different interests and different things he works on. This is Stella. She was at one of our last events. She works for a startup called Smartling. Another example of a really simple website. It has her resume, a blog, a contact page. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, and there are so many tools out there to build a really simple but powerful website that I really recommend that you use, this time as your summer's wrapping up to either update your website or create one if you don't have one yet. And a business card. So people will argue whether or not business cards are still relevant. I think they're relevant. I think they're nice to have. It's a nice physical reminder of who you've met and who you are. And it shows that you're going beyond just the resume, because everyone will have a resume. But if you can walk into an interview with a business card, that's a little bit easier to hand out to people. And a lot of people who, of course, are currently working full-time, they have a card. So as you are, meeting these people at your internship or during interviews, there's a good chance they'll hand you one. And it's really nice if you can hand them one back. So, of course, the basics, the obvious, your name, your email, your phone. I think a lot of people might not have a card when they're a student or they're just an intern because they say, well, I don't have a full-time job, or my company didn't give me cards. Well, there's nobody stopping you from, you making your own card. So putting the basics on it, putting some sort of link. So ideally, a website. If not, a link to your LinkedIn, I think, is like the next best bet, where it has kind of all your information. And then, of course, what do you do? Who are you? Give me a little taste, right? So what is your major? What is your industry? Something that reminds me, oh, okay, right, she's in marketing, or oh, okay, right, she's in startups or in fashion. And here are just some examples from the FindSpark community. Again, they're all really simple. Name, contact information, and a website. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to be a designer. And I recommend that you don't get 500 of them. There's a really good chance that that little what might change. Your major might change. Your interests might change. So I would recommend getting maybe 50 or so at a time, because you don't want to end up with a pile of 500 cards that have a different email on them, or your phone number changed, or that sort of thing. So I'm a really big fan of Moo cards. If you haven't heard of them, you order 50 at a time. They're really customizable, cool, nice quality cards. But really don't feel like you have to get 500 of them. Start with small batches so you can change them as your career goals change. So again, just to recap, and for you to start thinking about goals for yourself, because a really important part of developing these workshops is for you to be able to go home, digest what you've learned, and put that new information into action. So how can you position the experience that you've gained to help you get to your next step? What are different ways you can maintain your connection before your internship is officially over? And all of these platforms that are really important to showing people how great you are, what can you do to update them? And the really, really important high-level message here is that it's incredibly important to nurture your network. People are busy, and you can't always rely on other people to make sure that you're staying in touch, you're staying connected. You have to put in the work. And yes, it's more work to maintain and build and develop that network, but ultimately, if you put in that time investment early on in the beginning, ultimately it's going to make your life and your career easier, because you're going to have a supportive network of people who want to help you and support you. And the other thing to remember is you don't want to make people work to know how great you are. So take advantage of all these tools to make sure that you're positioning yourself in a way that is going to get you to that next step. Don't ever make people dig for information. Make it really easy and simple.